You just realized what the flash was behind me. You guys probably don't even remember, but I had a flash going behind me. I was like, what was that? Freaking out. I have the TV on over there. It's just muted. So who knows what's on. Okay. Cardiovascular diseases. So this is cardiovascular and lymphatic diseases. Blood-based infections, we're referring to bacteremia, is like any even little amount of bacteria in the blood at all is going to be bacteremia. The cardiovascular system should be free of all pathogens, or should be free of bacteria or viruses or anything, except for things that might be just passing through on the way to the lymph system. So yeah, it shouldn't have any in there. So bacteremia is any bacteria. If it's growing and flourishing, it's septicemia, septic, right? And viremia, viruses, and then fungi, fungemia, that's the word for the fungi one. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything. No, because we went over the system. You guys are pretty familiar with cardiovascular system probably. I mean, it's pretty basic, so not a lot of complicated stuff. So it should have no biota, right? All right, the plague is what we're going to start with first. This is a disease of the lymph system. So this is caused by Yersinia pestis. This is a gram-negative bacillus, which is rod-shaped. The reservoir for this disease is rodents. It's transmitted by fleas. Did I hold up? No, we're going back. Why? I didn't even talk about rabies. Who am I anymore? I hope you guys watch about rabies. I have a big thing over it where I don't know if you know this, but rabies is 100% fatal. This should be serious. I shouldn't be laughing about it. Rabies is 100% fatal. If you start having symptoms of rabies, it has hit your nervous system and there's nothing that we can do for you and you die. Not kidding. I'm not kidding. So this is why if you go work in a vet clinic and you're going to be handling potentially rabid animals, they will vaccinate you first. If you get bitten by an animal, you go to the ER, they will vaccinate you with the rabies vaccine and give you immune globulin. So antibodies that will fight against infection with rabies. So actually fight the rabies virus to give you a chance of fighting off the virus so it can't take hold in your nervous system. And you can build up an immunity and completely fight it off before it does get hold. So you have some time before that happens, and you really want to get as early as possible in with the vaccinations and the immune globulins so you can fight off the disease as soon as you can. Because like I said, once you start showing symptoms, you're done. That's true for humans and pets. Okay, so that's why with rabies, I don't know if you guys know that, because everybody just takes it for granted about, like, you know, your pets get vaccinated, whatever, rabies. Oh, foam at the mouth. Yeah, people do it too. People foam at the mouth too. That's because they can't swallow anymore. They have spastic throat that doesn't allow them to swallow anything, including water, which is why they call it hydrophobia. Also, because they can't swallow their own saliva, so it just foams at the mouth. And then eventually it makes you aggressive, of course, and delirious and all this as you progress through the disease. And then eventually coma, and then eventually death. That's rabies, 100%. If you start having any symptoms, you're done. Just why I wanted to bring that up. I know that goes in the neurological, but you guys should be watching both of these videos anyways. So I said it. I mean, I have a thing about it where I feel like it's just fascinating, and I think it's just underappreciated in a way that people don't realize how deadly it is, and how lucky you are every time that you might get exposed and don't get sick, or your pet or whatever. So if you ever get bitten, and I'm not kidding, if you ever get bitten by an animal that you even remotely suspect could be rabid, go to the hospital and get treated immediately. Save yourself. It's not a good way to go. Okay, so cardiovascular. I got interrupted. I interrupted myself in the middle of the plague, like that wasn't exciting enough. Okay, the plague, the Black Plague, the Black Death. It's been around for so long, definitely not a new disease, right? This is one that we consider an old world disease. It's been around forever. We don't even know for how long, right? So it's maintained within rodents, and that includes the prairie dog population. In the United States, it's mostly in the West, like in Utah, Colorado, like the Four Corners region, Arizona and New Mexico. That is where the prairie dogs are harboring the plague in the United States. You're not really at risk unless you go out there and get fleas from them. The fleas are going to be what transmit the actual bacteria from the infected rodents, the reservoirs, to people or whatever other animals, to each other, whatever. There's 3 forms of the plague. The least serious version is going to be the bubonic. I know you probably are like, that's not least serious. What are you talking about? Yeah, that's the least serious version. Like, that's the least serious. So you get these massive buboes, which are infections in the actual lymph nodes. They get all swollen up, and you can see them through the skin. And extremely painful. It's deadly, not as deadly as the pneumonic plague. The pneumonic plague, of course, is where it's going to be infection in the lungs, and that can be transmitted from person to person. It's not going to maintain infection that way, like in the population or anything, but it can be transmitted. And then we have the septicemic plague, which is 100% fatal. If you start developing septicemia and you start exhibiting the Black Plague symptoms, where you have your extremities, so your tips of your fingers and your toes start turning black, like what we talked about with severe diabetes. Yeah, they start turning black. That's the black part of the Black Plague, and that is due to poor circulation from that infection in the blood, as well as the bacteria in the blood. So that's the plague. Next was infectious mononucleosis. Mono is caused by a virus called Epstein-Barr virus. This is another herpes virus. It doesn't just cause mono, it also causes something called Burkitt's lymphoma. We really only see that in the immunocompromised, and it's more common really specifically in HIV patients, as well as those with malaria. So we do see these in like sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, so this stays with you as well. This is like any other herpes virus. It's going to hide out in your body and hang out there. So they can test you for that. That's how they know if you've ever had mono. Apparently, I have had mono. I never had any symptoms of it. Really pretty awful disease to have. Malaria. This is caused by the apicomplexan protozoa of the genus Plasmodium, most famously Plasmodium falciparum. And it is transmitted by mosquito bite, Aedes aegypti, or is it Anopheles? I can't even remember, so don't quote me on any of that, maybe. Mosquitoes for sure. What do I want to say about this? So the best way to prevent malaria really is going to be, trying to prevent mosquitoes. So putting mosquito nets over your bed, maybe wearing deterrents, maybe wearing long sleeves and long pants and light colors. Taking care of standing water that could harbor the breeding grounds for any of the mosquitoes. All of that are going to be ways to try to control malaria. There isn't a vaccine available. Well, there is a vaccine. It is crap. So yeah, I don't know what you want me to say about that. It's a crappy vaccine. It doesn't work very well. It's like 30% effective or something. So doctors don't even really offer it. All right, next are the hemorrhagic fevers, kind of what they sound like. So these guys are associated with fragility of the vessel walls. We could also be talking about the non-hemorrhagic fevers, like Q fever, but so you have to know those too, just FYI. I didn't put them on here because I don't feel them like they're that like as big of a deal as the hemorrhagic. But what I want to say is with the hemorrhagic fevers, they're going to have similar things associated with them. And just because the other ones are not hemorrhagic doesn't mean that they're not deadly. It just means that these ones cause bleeding. So they cause fragility of the vessel walls, and that can cause blood vessel leakage. So this includes Ebola, Marburg, dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya, and Lassa. All right, next we have Chagas disease, disease of the blood. This is caused by the protozoan Trypanosoma cruzi. It's transmitted by the kissing bug. They are kind of big bugs. They look sort of like a wheel bug, but without the wheel on the back of it. They're called triatomine or something like that. And they bite you and they defecate near the bite, and then that is what spreads the infection, often near the mouth or the eyes. And they can even cause infection into the actual eye and cause swelling and redness there. A shigoma is what forms whenever, you know, you have inflammation formed around the bite site. Anyways, yeah. So that's Trypanosoma cruzi. Then we have HIV. That's a pretty straightforward one. Not straightforward, that's not what I meant, but I mean, like, everybody's heard of it, right? So HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, it infects CD4 T helper cells. Remember about what CD4 T helper cells do? I'm sure you do, because it was just, I feel like an hour ago. T helper cells, the CD4 positive T helper cells, those are the guys that are going to help activate your B cells and activate your CD8 cytotoxic T cells, the ones that are involved in cell immunity. So antibody is the B, right? And cell immunity is the T. And so the HIV infects the CD4 T helper cells. And it's important to know that it is CD4 because that's actually the marker that one of the markers it uses to get into the cell. The HIV does, it hijacks that. And so it gets into the cell, and it has an RNA genome. It's a single-stranded RNA genome, and it uses reverse transcriptase, a special enzyme, to basically make RNA, single-stranded RNA. So let's say this is your single-stranded RNA, and reverse transcriptase allows it to make a DNA, and then we can split that apart and have that DNA and make a double-stranded DNA. So now we have our double-stranded DNA version of the HIV genome. And then we can put this into the host's genome. And that incorporates, HIV incorporates its DNA into its host's DNA, or your DNA. So that's how it does that. And we had already learned previously in chapter 9 that the way that things are supposed to go, the central dogma, is supposed to be DNA is made into RNA, right? So our big main blueprint that stays in, you know, the archives is our DNA, our genome, made of DNA. We go into the archives and we can make copies of the parts we're interested in at the time, the gene that we're interested in to make a protein. And we will transcribe that DNA blueprint into, in the archives, into an RNA, messenger RNA copy of the part that we're interested in. Then we can take that out of the nucleus and associate with some ribosomes and basically translate it, reading the codons to make amino acids. That's translation. And then we have the protein from the part we were interested in. So that's what we thought it was, DNA to RNA to protein. Reverse transcriptase turned the DNA to RNA part literally on its head. It is now that it's taking RNA and making DNA. It is the first that we've really ever seen of this. Reverse transcriptase is an incredible discovery, and as well as a useful tool. We can use this for our own meaning that we can have RNA, like RNA viruses or something, and we can use reverse transcriptase to make DNA, and then use PCR from what was, you know, RNA, which we can't do PCR just on that. We need to do that with DNA. So it's pretty interesting how that works, and that this virus has that. And it's not the only virus that has this. Hepatitis B also has this, and that's even more interesting. And I'll tell you why. Hepatitis B is interesting because it has reverse transcriptase, even though it's a DNA virus. So basically what it does is it has its little DNA, and it's a pretty big virus. It has a normal DNA, and it will split itself apart. So then we can have single strand and single strand. And then it will make an RNA copy. And then it will take that RNA, and it uses that as messenger RNA. So let's put an M, so you know it's mRNA. So we make all of our proteins from this, right? That makes sense. But then it doesn't use this to make more genome. No, it has to be extra. And so what it does is it does this crap from the RNA. Isn't that fascinating and ridiculous? But yes, that's how it works. So don't forget, HIV has reverse transcriptase, and it's not the only one that has it. So I'm going to conclude there. That's going to be our cardiovascular disease. I can definitely go into more detail, but it's not going to help that much here. Really, this is going to be more or less about you guys taking the time to memorize this stuff with flashcards and memory games and things like that. And of course, I will try to give you guys, some study Kahoots and everything like that as you go along the way. But it's just a matter of memorization through a lot of these chapters. Sorry, it's not very exciting, but it's diseases at least. So next chapter is going to be the respiratory diseases. There's more than one.